Hey everybody, I wanted to do a UV unwrapping tutorial using Maya 2015. I've got this forklift here that I'm going to use as my example model. And the goal is to cleanly unwrap all these polygons and lay them out in the texture editor in the 0-1 space so that I can then export them to Photoshop. So how do you access the UV Unwrap texture editor? It can be done in a couple ways. So at the bottom, if you're in the polygon drop-down menu here, that exposes the edit UVs and the create UVs. At the bottom of edit UVs is the UV texture editor. Okay, that's what that looks like. And then another way to access it is over here in window, about halfway down, UV texture editor. And it certainly isn't a bad idea to create a shelf button. So what I'll do is hold the Control and Shift button down, click on UV texture editor, and then there it is. You see that UTE show up? So now I can just click on that. It maybe saves me a couple clicks of having to go here, here, blah, blah, blah. All right. So what is this UV editor? When you hear the phrase 0-1 space, it's only referring to this upper right-hand quadrant. If the center is 0, 0, and let's say over here is 1, 0, up here in the upper right hand corner would be 1, 1. So between 0, 0 and 1, 1, they refer to that as the 0-1 space. You only ever use these other quadrants when you're doing advanced UV sets, and let's say you're doing you're making an airplane and you have 4 different kinds of liveries, or 4 different airlines have different logos. You would lay these out differently so that the game engine can swap out the textures on the same UV set. So we're only concerned with this 0-1 space right in here. And so let's just kind of start doing it. So a good workflow, I want to just explain this. If I select all the faces in this forklift, and I come up here to create UVs and I just planar map it, and why don't I look at those options, create UVs, planar mapping options. I've got best plane, bounding box, my axes, and then these things. I'm going to reset this just to make sure that we start from the default. So if I have camera selected, watch what happens. I'll look from the bottom of this forklift roughly and tilted, and then I'll hit apply. See how it took a snapshot of that camera, and then the UV gizmo, why don't I turn off that grid? The UV gizmo is aligned to the bottom. So why don't I change that? I'll make it the x-axis, and I'm looking at my little triad here in the lower left hand corner. My x is the red, my y is green, and z is blue. So I'll change it to x, hit apply. So there, that's looking from that side, and then you can kind of predict what y would do, right? So it doesn't really matter right now. I'll just go back to y, hit apply. My goal is to just put some sort of UV on this forklift, and then I'm going to scoot over here to the left. And so my mindset is to have all the stuff that I have not unwrapped over here on the left, and then the stuff that I have unwrapped will be over here on the right, and then moving left to right, I'll gradually finish. And when I don't have any more UVs down here in the undone section, I kind of know that I'm close and close to being done. So I've just put some temporary UVs on this thing, got everything out of the 0-1 workspace. Now why don't I just go start making some parts here. So I'm going to go to face, I'll double click on this wheel here, and just by the way I built it, it's automatically selected that other wheel. I'll hold the Control button down, I'll draw a marquee selection, and that deselects everything except that wheel. Alright, so come back up here to create UVs, and I'm going to do automatic mapping this time. Let's look at the options. And 6, it's fine. I'm just accepting the default and hit project. So what it did, and there's the gizmo for it, it gave me the front of the wheel, and I can go select shell, we'll move that. It gave me the back of the wheel, and then it gave me the tread. And the problem with the tread is it's in 4 different pieces. So here's a trick. I'm going to go to edge mode, I'll select this edge, and over here is a button called move and sew. So I'm going to click that, and look, it snapped 2 of those pieces together. Let me do that again. This edge, snap, that edge, move and snap. So that's really handy. So now I've got the tank tread, sorry, the wheel tread laid out, and let's flip it over 90 degrees. I'm going to hit R for the scale tool, or just click on the scale tool, and then scale that down. And let's move that over. And what I'm saying to myself is I'm going to paint a 1024 texture. That's 1024 pixels this way and 1024 pixels this way. What I'm saying is about 512 pixels horizontally is how much I'm going to dedicate to this tread, and maybe 80 or 75 pixels tall is how much I'm going to dedicate vertically. Alright, so what about this front of the wheel? I'm in UV mode. I select just a couple of these UVs, select the shell, and I can move those over, hit R for scale, and I'll scale it down, and I'm saying to myself that's approximately the size of texture resolution that I want to commit to that front of that wheel. Okay, so this piece, I'll select that shell, is the back of the wheel, and it is not a piece that my user will see very frequently. They can kind of see it right in here, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to commit as much texture resolution to a less visible piece than it is to the front of the wheel. So here's a trick. I'm just going to scale this thing down, and I'll just tuck it on the inside of that wheel right there. Actually, maybe why don't I save the inside of that space for the inside of the wheel, and I'll just move that right there. Alright, so now let me go get that part again. I went to face, and I double clicked and got the whole wheel well. Sorry, the wheel rim. Come up here to create UVs, automatic map. Okay, it's a similar thing. I'll go and I'll grab this piece and select shell, and then I'll scale it down. Now this piece can go on the inside like that, and that way I'm being really efficient with my UVs. Remember, the computer is going to be loading a 1024 or a 2048. It doesn't care where you put these, and so it's up to the 3D artist to be really efficient and utilize this space as well as you can. Okay, so this part, select that shell. That's the inner rim, so put that in the middle. And then it's the same thing here. I'll go to edge, grab that, hit move and sew, grab that. You can see how quickly I can move. And then I'll grab that whole shell and then knock it over, hit R for scale. And this piece is the inside of that rim, so it doesn't need to be as big as the tread. Scale that down, and let's move this someplace sensible, maybe like that. Alright, so the question that is frequently asked is, do I really have to unwrap all 4 of these tires and wheels? No, you certainly don't. So watch what happens. I'm going to delete the polygons of a wheel. Okay, so I just kind of blew away those wheels, and now let me go grab this wheel, edit, duplicate, Control D is the hotkey for that. Okay, I duplicated a wheel, and I'll scoot that back, and let's do it again. Control D, and then let's, I made sure that I went to modify and centered the pivot, and then I can rotate that around, and I'll make that -180 to make it perfect. Scoot that into place, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it because this is a low poly game model and it doesn't have to be precise engineering. And then I'll get that third one, but the point I'm trying to make is if we go back to the texture editor, it looks like only that first wheel is done, but if I go and I select this object, I hold the shift button down, and then come up here to a mesh combine, so they're all on the same object now. Now all of these UVs are overlaid one on top of another. So check that out. And then so that's a really useful way of only having to do one part and then copy it around. The UVs go with, and then ultimately those things wind up right on top of each other. And that's really handy, so when you start painting them, they're exactly where you want them to be. Alright, let's grab the seat. I'll do the seat real quick. Let's grab all the UVs in the seat, come up here to Create UVs, Auto, and let's move that over here. Just grab an edge, grab that edge, move and so, that one. You can see how fast you can move. Alright, and then let's grab that shell, scale it down, scoot that there. Let me do the side here. Grab that. Now, if you want to expand your selection, hold the shift button down and press the period key, and notice how that expands it, and then the comma key next to it shrinks it. That can be really useful, especially when you're doing symmetrical objects. So I'll just double click to get this entire forklift body, and then let me automatic unwrap that, and then I'll scoot that kind of over here. And what I want to concentrate on is this side panel here, the most visible part of this forklift, and that looks to be this part right here. Let's select that entire shell, and I want to paint horizontally. If you can imagine, when I'm in Photoshop, it's not going to be very useful for me to try to paint this thing horizontally. I'll constantly be turning my head sideways. I want to paint this thing right side up. So I'm saying that this is roughly the size of this shell that I want to paint. Let me come around and do that side as well, and that would be that shell. Looks like it's not attached, so let's do that edge trick. Move and so. Yeah, there's all sorts of pieces that are kind of fractured right now, so I'll grab this piece, that piece, there, hit move and so. Select that shell. Oops. Let's go to UVs. Select that shell. Let's rotate it right side up. Now let's get that big visible piece, that one right there, move and so, there. Okay, so here is the other side of the forklift, right there. And we'll scoot that down. So really, my layout is kind of looking like, select that whole thing. It's looking something like this. Now, this is going to be kind of like a cooking show where I then spend the next 45 minutes unwrapping this thing. And that's about how much time it should take me, 45 to an hour, to do this whole forklift. So I'm going to pause the video, finish it, and then I'll show you what the finished result should look like. Okay, so here's the whole forklift unwrapped, and then I'll just kind of show you some landmarks. There's the wheels, and then here's the tread, and then the seat. There's that seat. There's the front. I put that side right here, and this side is right there. And now real quickly I'm going to show you how to apply a texture to this. Now, okay, so you might be saying, what texture? Have you painted this thing already? I have, but let me show you how I did that. Once I've got my UVs all packed inside of the 0, 1 space, I'm coming over here to Polygons, UV Snapshot, and I want to paint a 1024, so I'll type in 1024 there. Sometimes it's a 2048. You might be asking yourself, why are we using these weird numbers, 1024, 2048? It's a power of 2, and so as the speed of computers has improved along Moore's law over the last 10-15 years, the sizes of these textures have grown. It used to be 256, then 512, then 1024, then 2048, and we're even painting 4096s nowadays. So somebody has discovered that these textures will load just a little bit faster on our video cards if we adhere to a power of 2. So that's what that's all about. I want a JPEG for this thing, and I want to tell it where to go. So let's just put it in the right spot. So I'm going to call this forklift UV template. Hit save. OK, and it just saved that JPEG. So I can close that, and probably a good time to save the file. And then I'm going to open up Photoshop, and then I'll load up that template to have a look at it. Okay, so here's what that looks like once you open up that JPEG in Photoshop. And just to prove that it worked out okay, I come up here to image size and change this to pixels someday. And 1024 by 1024, and a resolution of 72. Make sure that's always set to 72 because we certainly don't need it any deeper than that. Okay, so step 1, we don't want to paint with a black background on white lines. Just hold down the control button and press I, and that flips it. Okay, the next thing you want to do is unlock this background in just a quick and dirty way. Is just duplicate it and throw that one out. And then let's rename this thing UVs, and then let's change it from a normal to a multiply. And that way it's transparent, and all the files that I do underneath it, make sure this is at the top, and then everything that I do underneath it will now be seen through this UV multiply, because that's a multiply and the rest are normal. Alright, so let's, on this one, what color should this forklift be? Well, how about like some sort of baby diarrhea brown, some puce yellow, some really gross, old, rusty color. And so I'll just fill by hitting Shift Backspace, and then my foreground color. I'm going to fill the whole thing, and look, those UVs you can see right through them. So then I go about painting my forklift, and then hide this, save it, and then map it to the forklift. So real quick, I'll show you how to set that up in Hypershade. Come up here to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, and a very common shader to use for metal objects would be a blend. So I'll click on blend, and double click on this, and over in the attribute editor, in the color swatch, I'll click on this checker here, and it's a PSD file. And so I need to make sure that I say PSD file here. Don't hook up a file. That's kind of a good proven way to crash Maya. So if you're going to save your textures as PSDs, then make sure you connect them as PSDs. And then now click on this manila folder and track down in your computer where you've saved that PSD. In my case, it's here. And it's called diffuse. Make sure that the forklift is selected, and then right click on the shader, assign material to selection, and it doesn't look like it's worked, but you have to come up here and make sure that this textured kind of ball with the checkerboard on it is pressed. Now this is a little troubleshooting thing. Look, you see how it's kind of transparent there? This happens with Maya sometimes. It's kind of creepy. So what's going on is if you mouse over your connections here, you'll see that there's a transparent component here. So I'm just going to select that, delete it, and then middle mouse click and drag and say color. And now look what happens. That transparency went away. So just gotta make sure that that doesn't happen. So just as a quick review here, here's what the UVs, here's what a decent layout should look like. And then I can press this to kind of dim it. That's what it looks like with just a checkerboard. And that's no texture at all with these buttons right here. Hey, I hope this helps, and please feel free to post questions in the YouTube channel if you're stuck. I tend to get to those probably within 24 hours. All right, good luck. Happy modeling.